Hello and welcome to Senior Connections. This is our monthly look at all kinds of topics that relate to older adults, their caregivers, family, and friends. And we come to you every month and share a variety of topics that could range from Medicare to prescription management to services available in the community, all kinds of things, trying to help you navigate what can be a confusing web of services out there. And today I'm very excited to have with me Arturo Puckerin, who is the Executive Director of Muskegon Oceana Community Action Partnership, better known as MOCAP in this community. So welcome, Arturo.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. So we're going to talk about a lot of things, including the census, but first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. I don't even know you all that well because I know you're relatively new to the area. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm originally from Los Angeles area, California. Came out to Michigan about 6 years ago for law school to Lansing.
Okay.
Met my wife, fiance at the time, and kind of fell in love with the lakes. From a military family, and I actually have family concurrent with what's going on in the news today, working with CDC, but they're actually located in Tanzania, Africa.
Oh, so, my.
Yeah, I am building our roots as a Michigander and happy to be here.
Wonderful. So, background in law. So, what brings you to MOCAP then?
So MOCAP, one of the first things I did once coming into law school was developing externship experience because one of my premier goals was to work in social services and human services and to use that knowledge of governmental structure and regulations to develop and implement plans, most importantly for self-sustainability and self-efficiency plans that community action agencies spearhead. And that's what brought me to 8CAP in District 70. And I worked there as a housing programs coordinator and, living in a variety of different areas, serving 4 counties there in a pretty regional, a pretty rural region in Michigan, in Region 5. I was able to kind of learn the very, very discerned correlations between poverty in rural areas and inner city areas and in the districts altogether. And that's what actually brought me into working in mental health and recovery, which was my prior position before coming to MOCAP through the Ottawa County Community Mental Health Millage.
Okay.
And upon graduation, I got my master's in public administration, and I thought, what better way than to go back into community action, but in a grander scale, pertinent to programmatic diversification. And that's what brings me here to this great area.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So 8CAP, that covered what county? So we're in the middle of the state.
Yeah.
You've learned about the state. You
the
6 years, you know how to use your hand for a map then.
So that would be the inner palm. Okay. So that's Gratiot, which is the Alma College, St. Louis area. Montcalm, which is Greenville, Stanton area. Isabella, which is Mount Pleasant, CMU area. And then Ionia County.
Which is where I'm from. That's what I thought. I remember 8CAP. So
oh, yeah.
That's what I thought. So you really did have a little bit of everything, which is great because MOCAP is Muskegon and Oceana. So you've got the inner cities and the poverty levels that we experience in Muskegon, and then a very different kind of thing happening in Oceana. And while our TV show is focused on Muskegon, we serve Oceana as well. So,
absolutely. So
that was really good practice and experience for you. So tell us a little bit. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about MOCAP, but for people who don't know, share a little bit of history of what that's been. It's about dealing with people in poverty and trying to help them live their best lives, but tell us a little bit about that.
So the community action model is all centered around self-sufficiency. And one of the primary goals in self-sufficiency is the prevention of barriers to economic opportunity. So through the Community Services Block Grant, we identify prime barriers to economic opportunity every 3 years in our community needs assessments. And what we do is draft a strategic plan as state designated community action agencies to address those barriers to economic opportunity. This year is quite an interesting year because while conventionally we have always worked mostly in prevention of homelessness and eviction and through utility shutoff protection, foreclosure prevention, and even home buyers education. Collateral to our food programs, we are now looking into taking more of a recovery-based approach in adaptation of growing needs pertinent to the opioid epidemic, pertinent to the affordability of childcare, and of course generational poverty here in the Lakeshore.
Are you you talk about affordability of childcare, do you have much conversation about the issues with people who are caring for their aging parents and the adult, because that's one of the things, like when we talk with United Way, we hear a lot about child care, but we've got, it's really dependent care is really a big issue, because even just with what's going on with coronavirus, you know, there's lots of conversations about,
on the minute,
you know, about, every minute, about what do you do if schools close, if things, but people also have the same thing if you've got a shortage of care providers now, who's taking care of an aging family member.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm sure you've got a lot of older adults that you're dealing with at MOCAP.
Oh, yeah.
Because poverty is an issue for many, many people, and trying to keep them out from tipping into that.
Yeah, and you know, that's something that has risen, particularly in our Commodities for Senior Food program, and through our Census outreach efforts, which bring us here today. One of the key hard-to-count populations in Muskegon County that we noticed in 2010, and actually statewide, was actually our older populations, our senior citizen populations, particularly those that are living independently. Community aging is quite the initiative. There's a lot of issues around Social Security at this time, and what we find is that sometimes individuals that receive disability income, especially our elder citizens, are sometimes not meeting the federal poverty guideline criteria to satisfy for conventional MDHS assistance or even for our programs. So what we've done is taken a more proactive step through partnering with a variety of other senior service agencies in this area, not just pursuant to the census, but through our food distribution programs, so that we can be a little bit more proactive in serving the day-to-day needs of our senior populations, so that don't necessarily slip through the cracks.
Wonderful. I'm sure we're going to have some more conversations about that between our agencies probably. So let's get to the census, because you mentioned that, and that's really my main reason for wanting to hear, because we're in 2020. And MOCAP is the lead agency for the Census 2020 in Muskegon and Oceana counties. So I think most people know that the census happens every 10 years in those actual decade years, 2010 and 20, conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau, and the goal of that is count every person who lives in the United States and its territories, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. How did MOCAP become the lead agency for that? Is that new? Did it happen in 2010? I don't remember.
Actually, no, it didn't happen in 2010. It's new to 2020. And what we found was through MCA, because we're part of a network that's actually headed by Lansing's Community Action Agency for the 30 community action agencies throughout the state. And one thing that was recognized through a DHS needs assessment was that while we're implementing federal subsidy as state designated agencies, we would probably be a good prime liaison for our highly concentrated areas. Muskegon was identified by MNA as an area that's highly concentrated, along with Ottawa County and Allegan County here on the lakeshore, though disproportionately undercounted in 2010. Now, Michigan is in a pretty significant position, because 10 years ago in 2010, believe it or not, Michigan was the only state that showed zero population growth. We're talking even Guam.
Wow, the only state.
Yeah.
So 49 others and territories showed population
growth. And that stuck out like a sore thumb, because as we know, Michigan is a place, one of the states where population growth is certainly not an issue. And that's when we were able to dig beneath the surface and recognize that it was hard to count populations that were simply being undercounted. Michigan, of course, lost a delegate seat, representation, congressional representation, but most importantly, we lose about $3,000 for every person that's not counted. So throughout these 10 years, we lost close to $100 million or so that specifically could go to programs and millages that support our senior citizens, our individuals struggling with poverty and the barriers therewith.
And infrastructure and all kinds of things.
Infrastructure is the big one.
Maybe roads.
The roads, perhaps.
I mean, from LA, you know, there's a vast difference in the roads there. You don't have road salt and all that. We could have a whole conversation. So, so you're talking a little bit. So it's important to our state for a lot of reasons. Congressional representation. So we hope that we gain a seat back, correct? But it also has something to do with setting boundaries or district boundaries and things like that.
Budgets.
But budgets for sure. Millions of dollars. I mean,
millions.
Just as Senior Resources gets most of our money through the Older Americans Act and the Older Michiganians Act, well, that comes from counts. I mean, it's based on how many people you've got and how many older adults. And then there's the younger, you know, with Head Start slots and all kinds of things for kids and everything in between, infrastructure funding. So let's talk a little bit more about our region and Michigan and what's going to be done? When does this officially, the census
Begin?
counting starts when?
It actually has begun as of next week.
Okay.
So as of the middle of March, they actually start going out into the mail. This year is a very, very interesting year because there's 3 ways to complete the census. Through mail, it'll come looking like this. It's our conventional mail-in form. Standard census fill out. One thing that we should all take heed of, though, is that everyone that lives in the home should be counted, not necessarily just family members. And the other 2 new novel methods are online and through self-representation over the telephone, by which codes will be supplied to individuals through mail to register therewith. This is really good for our younger populations, because we were actually also
They're
able
not
to.
going to fill out that paper form.
No, and they didn't 10 years ago.
Yeah, right.
And
And they aren't going to answer a phone call.
yeah, and it's our
They go
our
online.
18 to 24 demographic. 10 years ago, these are individuals that were minors. They were 8 to 14
Right.
at this time. So what we could have through this lack of representation could be, in the grand scope of what you see, an apparent lack of population growth, because you have these childhoods that are not necessarily getting counted. Of course, 5% of children 5 and under, because they're not in the public school system, especially in federal poverty level neighborhoods, also go undercounted. So in the aggregate, that's what MOCAP aims to neutralize, to nullify, as the lead, serving these populations, seniors through our various programs, and our hard to count individuals at the poverty level. We're satisfying 2 birds with 1 stone, because we're able to engage the Tell 2 campaign, but for the first time this year in Oceana, we're actually also able to be a little bit more proactive with our immigrant population and our Spanish-speaking populations that were going to be a new hard-to-count demographic that were apprehensive of the proposed citizenship question.
So let's just jump to that one right now.
Yes.
Is there a citizenship question on the
No,
census?
there will not be a citizenship question on the census.
All right, so people don't need to worry about that, because that's one of the things you hear, and especially, as you said, it's probably not so much in our county of Muskegon, but north.
Yeah.
And some south in Ottawa.
Yeah.
You've
Oh, yeah.
got people who may not be citizens, and so they're not going to be asked that.
Absolutely. And there's a flip side to that coin, and that's, of course, governmental scrutiny.
Yeah, they're
This
worried
information-
that they're going to fill it out, and they're going to say Hispanic and all of this, and then somehow somebody's going to go, okay,
Yeah.
are you here legally? And if not, you're out.
Yeah,
And
it
so there's
becomes
a
an
fear of
ICE
that.
issue. Yeah, and we're here to say no. That's not the case. This information is strictly counted by the U.S. Census Bureau. It's not shared or dispelled with other governmental agencies. As far as outside influence, Google, Facebook are actively participating in cybersecurity prevention, specifically for public access computers that access uscensus.gov. And MOCAP is going to be here to assist in this process. We have workshops that are going to be on site beginning April 1st, which is Census Day. And what we'll do is offer a step-by-step guide on how to complete the census. We're here to answer various questions. Many people have questions about, what about other languages? The census will be available in over 65 languages nationwide. So we're here to help. We're here to answer all census needs and even guide in the facilitation and completion of that process.
So does everybody get a written thing, or are they getting a postcard that says, here's where you go? Does everybody get the same kind of thing?
Yes. Now, some people will get a phone call,
Okay.
first and foremost. Some people have already started getting the phone calls as recent as even the past couple weeks. The phone call will have directions where to go online to get any type of registration number if someone chooses to submit and complete that online or through the telephone. But the telephone, of course, is a twofold process where the written information is then submitted online. And then there's the door-to-door approach, which is the conventional paper form. This will be the form that most people will receive, 99.9%, collateral to instructions as to how to complete it through the other 2 methods, if more feasible.
Okay. So if I get that paper form, I can go online and do it if I'm comfortable doing that?
Oh, yes,
If I'm
yes.
not, if my grandma,
Yeah.
I don't have one, but if grandma gets one and she's not comfortable with doing that online, what can she do?
She can
She
do.
could obviously ask her grandchild to help her, but
Oh, yeah.
what other things? If they don't have that, what can they do?
If she doesn't have it, she can complete the paper form. If the paper form is a bit meticulous, it's not too extensive, but I do understand there's that apprehension. It's a governmental document. You don't want to not cross an I or cross a T or dot an I. That's where MOCAP comes in. That's where the United Way comes in. That's where the Muskegon County Community Foundation comes in as partnering agencies in a complete count committee with workshops on site to guide all individuals, no matter the age, in completing this process.
How many questions is the form roughly?
The form's about 8 to 9 questions.
Okay, that's good. How long do you estimate it should take?
Let's see, if there's just 2 or 3 people in a house, 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's asking what kind of things?
So it begins with who you are, number of people in your house. That's the very first thing that they're asked. It then identifies relatives versus non-relatives.
So you could have 2 generations, or 3 generations. You could have mom, dad, kids, and grandma, and then the best friend of one of your kids whose parents don't live here anymore or whatever, or
Yeah.
somebody who's been staying there. That person should be counted as well. It's not
Absolutely.
just people who are related to you.
Absolutely.
If you have somebody who's boarding with, a college student who's staying there, you should count that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And the college students, this has been something of discussion for quite some time. It's has always conventionally been one of our harder to count populations. Fortunately, universities help with this data, help with dispelling this same information. The outreach and the telling, the informed process is actually the most significant aspect of this entire process.
All right, so they have to tell who they are, how many people are in their homes, what other kind of things is it asking?
And then it'll go on to ask you, it'll discern whether or not they're relatives,
Okay.
in-laws even. Then it'll even ask if it's a house, apartment, mobile home, or type of unit that you're living in. And then it'll ask for your phone number.
Okay.
By then, you're literally done. It'll ask you a couple other things about your actual name, your sex. It'll go down to your actual age, and then it skips the part about citizenship, which was supposed to be question number 6. 6 of 8.
Okay. Does it ask you anything about income?
No, it doesn't ask about income.
Okay. Doesn't ask if you're a legal resident or not.
No, it doesn't ask that, but there's another way that it does ask that through centrally just asking, your birth date. It does ask, however, one person, you do need to take heed. While it doesn't necessarily ask whether you're a citizen, it does ask your race or ethnicity.
Okay.
So this is something that can still be utilized. What is the person's race is actually the final question. The most interesting and duplicitous question is if it asks if you also live somewhere else. And that's the one to pay attention to, because we do sometimes have people that may live in certain places half of the year.
Right.
Our snowbirds.
Right. It's wherever they pay their taxes, really, probably, right? So
Yes.
there are people who live here and people who live in Florida. There are people who live in Florida part of the year because they don't have to pay state.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to look at where you file your taxes. If you
Yes.
file your taxes in Florida, then you should count it as Florida, right? If
Yes.
you file your taxes in Michigan, then you count it
That's
as
where you're
Michigan.
counted as for Michigan.
Right.
And,
So there's a lot
that's
of
where it all
things it's
goes.
not
That's where it all
asking.
ties.
It is not asking for their social security number,
No,
right?
no.
So there's not an identifying piece there, and then there's not identity theft issues with that.
The only aspect that could ever come into identity theft would be the part where it asks your actual first name and your actual birth date and your address. But nowadays we have so many protections towards using those 3 minimal aspects or criteria of an individual
Right.
to actually steal their identity.
Right, it's hard to do it with just that.
Yeah, it's a business card information. And that's it, 7 questions.
Right, that's
Yeah.
pretty easy.
Yeah.
And this is all confidential, as you said, so if they come in and they had this in paper, does it generally, do most places then shred it afterwards so that that doesn't get out, or they could do that themselves, or?
Now, there's 2 options. It's a lot like going to the ballot boxes yesterday. They do destroy this information.
Okay.
It is known, like with most agencies, the paper copy is not held or it's sent out
You're
through
not
the mail.
keeping it at MOCAP, they're not keeping it at
No.
United Way, they're not keeping it at the Census Bureau.
Yeah, in fact, we can only guide to the very, very last step. The process of actual submission has to be done by the individual.
Oh, okay.
For that protective reason.
So you could help them get on the website. You could be sitting there to help answer questions.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Yeah.
But they've got to push submit. Arturo cannot push submit for
Yep,
them. I
cannot.
can't come in and do that for
No,
somebody.
just like Marvin, just like anything like that.
Okay. So does somebody have to like be a head of household? And is that an I'm trying, it's been a long time since I've done this. I'm trying to think, did I do it or did my husband do it? And when 10 years ago, my kids were minors, so I knew I could,
Yeah.
now I've got both at college, so I got to make sure that we all coordinate that, you know, if we count them at our household, they're not
Oh,
there
absolutely.
as well, because we don't want that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So the month of April is your really strong push for this, right? So by April 1st is Census Day.
Census
April
Day.
30th is really the official last day of it.
Last
correct?
call.
But then what happens after that? Realistically, it's not like you're only given 30 days, because what if
No.
snowbirds aren't back?
No,
What if they haven't come back to get their mail or whatever?
Realistically, 2 to 4 weeks is another reminder that comes out
Okay.
with an official last call to get this information turned in before June. And, you know, really that's do or die for us and for our communities as far as being counted before that time.
Now, is that when, because I've heard about people going out to the homes, they're going to come knock on, you know, so if I've already filled it out, they're probably not coming to my door, because unless it was like the day before and it hasn't
Yeah.
been updated or something, but.
And it would be census workers.
Right, and so talk to us about that. So census workers, how are you going to know they're census workers? Because there's scam concerns, and not
Absolutely.
everybody wants to answer their doors.
A variety of security concerns. Now, the Census Bureau workers will be identified as Census Bureau workers. Census people are also going to be working part-time. There's a new practice actually through Michigan Works and through census2020.gov. Here in Muskegon County, it's paying $18 an hour for anyone looking for part-time employment to help with the Tell 2 campaign. But one of the primary functions exclusive to the knocking on door-to-doors will actually be the outreach initiatives. Things have changed as far as social media goes, as far as the different mechanics that are adherent to the Tell 2 campaign. And it's one of the reasons why us as a state designated community action agency is taking the lead in more of these processes. Conventional to the old door-to-door model, which was a little bit less practical, because a lot of times people that are a little bit apprehensive of this type of scrutiny, or any altogether, are not that likely to
They're not
even
going to
answer
open
the
their door to somebody they don't know.
They're not going to, and there's, the dog may growl
Yeah.
a little.
Right. So ideally, they fill it out online, maybe the phone call kind of thing. But if
Yeah.
they come out, if somebody comes, they should have ID. What else
Yes.
would they be looking for?
They'll have an actual card, an actual census card with the logo, U.S. Census. They actually have an ID with their name. They'll have 2 forms of ID identifying that they work specifically with the U.S. Census. But then most importantly will be the red herrings, if you will, and that'll be questions that are not related to the census. That's what makes the process so straightforward. There's only 3 to 4 identifying questions that'll be asked before you're actually provided with a paper copy, and then the individual leaves. Any type of other information about your income, about your social security, vehicle, anything with
That
assets
has nothing. If
is a
anybody
scam.
asks you that, it's a scam.
It's a scam.
Do not give that. You should
Yes.
never, ever. I mean, we talked about
And report
Social
it.
Security and all kinds of things. So they should call the police and say
Yes.
somebody's been through here.
At least put in a report.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. So that tells us a lot about. They're not going to ask for bank information.
No.
And you've talked a little bit about jobs, so they can call Michigan Works if they want to get $18 an hour. That's not a bad gig for something part-time.
Yeah, or even go
Time
to,
a year for that.
yeah, or if you just go to Census 2020, census.gov.jobs. Pretty straightforward. It's a 5-minute application.
So they probably have to be a little bit mobile and like to talk to people and be willing to get out
Absolutely.
there in the weather and
Yeah.
get out and do that.
And we're excited to get some of our younger adults, because they could be a little bit more of a contagion, hate to use that word, contagion in these days, with the younger individuals.
Yeah, they might be better at that. So we've got about
Absolutely.
5 minutes left.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered the census pretty well. So let's talk a little bit more about MOCAP and the kind of programs that you have, especially with regards to our older adults. So talk
Yeah.
about the food and the energy assistance and those kind of things. Lots
Yeah.
of good info.
Oh yeah, so this week actually is our Emergency Food Assistance Program week, where we serve about 1,900 consumers here in Muskegon County and Oceana County with our commodities food boxes, sponsored through USDA and through the Department of Education. everything from juices to meats to produce to a variety of functions for the amount of people per household. And then we have what's called the CSFP program, Commodities Senior Food Program, where we will now actually be taking a more proactive approach and actually helping in the outskirts, more rural areas of Muskegon County, like here in Eggleston Township, going towards Casnovia and Ravenna, with the transportation and distribution of some of these commodities for a lot of our seniors, especially in our winter months, that have a lot of issues being as mobile.
They don't like to drive as much, so they might still drive, but a lot of times they don't drive when it's cold, when it's wintry, when it's dark. And it's, dark
a lot of us don't.
Yeah, exactly. So how often do you do those commodities distributions?
So we do commodities every month, 60 and over. That's the only questions we ask, not income-based, just 60 and over. And then we actually have a daily walk-in pantry, emergency shelter and food pantry.
And where are you located?
We're at 1170 West Southern Avenue. And, through that program, individuals, regardless of age, regardless of function, can come in. If you need any type of daily or even hygiene products, we have everything from shampoos, brushes, soaps, diapers, of course, wipes, everything to help individuals kind of fill the gaps in their self-sufficiency needs. And then we have our conventional programs, like our foreclosure prevention. Our biggest program, of course, is our eviction prevention program. We've now started a partnership with Community Encompass and actually with the eviction court right here in Muskegon County, Mission for Area People, and with DHS, with the eviction prevention program, where we can now match and work with landlords for budgeted repayment processes to keep individuals in their homes, inclusive to court costs.
Great.
Yeah, and then
a lot of great things there.
Thank you. Yeah, we'd like to continue to do more and more. This is going to be an interesting year because it is the census. We do our annual report every year. One of the key things that we want to make sure that we're always doing quarterly, we check with our strategic plan monthly, is making sure that we're addressing the community's ongoing needs. So there's going to be a lot more to come through recovery, through coaching, through wellness recovery action plans, and even veteran programs that we're now exploring.
Wonderful. Well, as you know, and I talk about it here all the time, our older adult population is the fastest growing segment of society. I mean, our birth rates
nationally.
are declining, and nationally, yes. And in Michigan, it's exceeding a lot of the rest of the nation. I can't remember the exact statistic, but sometime in the next 15 or 20 years, our aging population is growing faster even than Florida. And then the old, we're living longer, so the the 85 and older, that's a really fast growing thing. So one of the things, again, why it's so important to fill out the census, because we really have a concern about looking down the road. Do we have the things in place to keep people aging at home, which is what they want?
Yeah.
We see that all the time. So your programs work hand in hand with that to realize that that's what people want to do and to try to figure out ways. Sometimes it's just some short-term help they need. Yeah. We don't know, we only have less than a minute left, so we know that we can't talk about, medical things, but the impact an unexpected medical bill can have on it. So we'll be talking more about this, I'm sure.
Yeah, and even in our other populations, something as your car breaking down in the Alice population can be very detrimental.
Right, and our older adults are certainly worried about that with their kids too, even if it isn't impacting older adults. Sometimes it does in a different way because their kids are, or they've been okay, but now they're trying to help their kids or their grandkids. So we can have all kinds of discussions.
Oh, yeah.
So in our last seconds, I want to just thank you, Arturo, for coming and sharing this information. It's so important. This half hour flew by. For more information, you can call MOCAP at 231-725-9499. Got that off their website. So 725-9499. And as always, if you can't remember that, you can always call 211 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They know how to reach them. Tell them you're trying to reach MOCAP. Just tell them your story. They'll let you know. So give them a call. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next month.